Hi everyone, Anna Shell from TutorCore here. We have broken the math section into two videos because there's a lot to cover. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. First, we're going to do a quick overview of what students can expect on the math section of the SAT. So students start out the math section with 25 minutes to complete 20 questions without a calculator. They're given a reference box of mostly geometric formulas that they may need. This section includes one part where students will need to grid in answers rather than choosing from 4 potential answer choices. The next part of the math section is 55 minutes long, and students may use a calculator in that section. They're given the same formulas to reference, and this part of the test also includes a grid-in section. Be sure to check out the acceptable types of calculators on the SAT website. Preferably, students will have access to a calculator with both graphing and trig functions available. And again, they should be practicing with the calculator they're planning on using on the real test. The SAT math section consists mainly of algebra. However, students may also encounter arithmetic, geometry, and basic trig. Essentially everything for calc, advanced trig, and advanced stats is fair game. Although they'll need to know a certain amount of content to do well, they should start thinking about it more as a reading and problem-solving test in some ways, rather than a regular math test. The math test tested is actually fairly basic. What makes it complicated is the way the questions are asked and figuring out the easiest approach. All of the math students need to know for the SAT is covered on pages 184 to 225 in the Black Book. This is by far the longest toolbox that the Black Book provides. So if students are having trouble on the math section, they have gaps to fill, be sure to start early on the content practice. Content mastery, again, it's important to scoring well, but it also doesn't guarantee a high score, because students also need to understand the rules. Which we're going to go over now. So we're going to go over a total of 11 rules in this next part of the training. So the first rule to remember is that the actual math content is fairly basic. The College Board really has to work within certain limitations to make sure all students can access the material, so the actual calculations shouldn't be that complicated. If the calculations are super complicated, then the student's probably not doing the question correctly. So mainly the student needs to learn how to think creatively about approaching each problem in order to find the correct answer in a timely way. Words are important, second rule. Students may think they understand the definition of a word like integer, but they don't really know the parameters. So they really need to know the terms, they need to know them well. Check out the math toolbox, quiz your students, test them, make sure they understand everything like the back of their hand. Formulas. So students are given a set of formulas. Mostly those are the ones they'll need to reference. There's a couple of other formulas that they may need that are not provided, and we actually have a handout that you can use and you can share with a student that has some of those formulas that aren't provided on test day. For the most part, the formulas aren't super helpful, but it's good to memorize some of the more basic ones. But they shouldn't be memorized anything very complex. It's more important students understand the definitions and properties of the concepts in each question. We already went over this in the science section, but remember that figures are generally drawn to scale, so students can use this to their advantage to eliminate wrong answer choices quickly. As we mentioned in the first rule, all the content students need to know is in that short toolbox, so really help them learn those and then move on to strategy. Theoretically, every question in the math section can be answered in less than 30 seconds. If the solution is taking longer to come up with, then the student may not be approaching it in the right way. The seventh rule is that all of the information that the students need to solve every math question is provided by the question. Again, this seems obvious, but I think students don't need to bring in a lot of outside knowledge here. So sometimes an answer choice cannot be determined, and if the student has decided this is the best answer choice, they need to have a good reason for it. So all the information is there, no guessing required. Every wrong answer choice provided usually represents a mistake that the College Board thinks the students might make. So this can be used to the student's advantage, and we'll talk more about this later. So for now, just know that the wrong answer choices often provide a lot of juicy information about the right answer choice. So students need to stop thinking about the math section as having some sort of order of difficulty. They can really easily miss a detail in every question provided. So they should think of every question as its own question, its own ecosystem, and approach it that way. The College Board doesn't give extra points for showing your work. So if a student can come up with a shortcut that eliminates doing any math at all, that's great. They shouldn't be trying to satisfy a math teacher. They should avoid doing a lot of formal math and really try and find shortcuts whenever possible. For the most part, it's better to leave fractions as fractions rather than switching to decimal expressions. If a question uses a decimal, then a decimal answer is okay. Otherwise, generally, students should be keeping things in fraction form. Okay, so those are the rules. The next video on our math training gets into a little bit more nitty-gritty detail and is a little bit longer. So I will